Friends, let us discuss the last subtopic of your foreign trade policy, where the focus will be on your deemed exports. Friends, your deemed exports is in fact covered by your chapter 7 of your foreign trade policy given by central government, policy aspects, and your handbook of procedures, volume 1, which talks about the procedures aspects issued by DGFT. And friends, let me be very clear. As far as your deemed exports is concerned, we have already discussed everything about your deemed exports when we have discussed all the other concepts. So it is only consolidation now. There is nothing new in your deemed exports. Now, deemed export, let us categorize into two. The first is supply by a manufacturer, and second is you are talking about supply by main contractor to the project or subcontractor to the project authority. Now, supply by a manufacturer, the first category, friends, this category is exactly the same which was there in GST. Now, the second category, which means the first category of deemed exports is there in GST as well as foreign trade policy. The second category, where you are talking about main contractor and subcontractor, is there only in your foreign trade policy. And friends, that was the reason I said your foreign trade policy concept of deemed export is wider than the concept of deemed exports in section 147 of your GST. So the first part where you are talking about deemed exports part 1, let us call this deemed export part 1. Let us call this as deemed export part 1, deemed exports part 2. Deemed export part 1 is nothing but whatever we have discussed in your GST. What was deemed export? Supply of goods to an advance authorization holder or duty free import authorization holder. Supply of goods against advance authorization scheme, including advance authorization on annual requirement or duty free authorization scheme, or supply of capital goods to EPCG authorization holder, or supply of goods to include inputs as well as capital goods to EOU, STP, HTP and BTP. Friends, this is nothing but deemed exports in your GST also. Rather, you have to understand this way. Deemed exports in GST was taken from your foreign trade policy, but only the first part. What is that? You are supplying goods to advance authorization holder or a duty free import authorization holder, or you are supplying capital goods to EPCG holder, or you are supplying goods, inputs or capital goods to EOU, EHTP, STP and BTP. That is the first part. And friends, the second part where you are talking about main contractor or the subcontractor, the supply of goods is to United Nations or international organizations or projects which are financed by them. So, supply of goods is to United Nations or international organizations or any project which is financed by them, or supply of goods is to nuclear project which is through competitive bidding, either national competitive bidding or international competitive bidding. So, supply of goods in the next case is to a nuclear project, whether it is through international competitive bidding or national competitive bidding, because from now onwards it is always be international competitive bidding. Next, friends, we are talking about supply of goods to a project which is financed by multilateral or bilateral agencies of funds notified by your Ministry of Finance, Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, through international competitive bidding. So, you are supplying goods to a project which is financed by either multilateral or bilateral agencies or funds, which is notified by your Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, and this project is allocated through international competitive bidding. Next, friends, we are talking about the supply of goods to a project where import is permitted at zero customs duty, which means that you can import it. You are talking about a project where import can be done without any customs duty, and that customs exemption notifications 50/2017 customs, and again it is also that project is also selected through international competitive bidding. And friends, the last scenario is supply of goods to mega power projects which is through international competitive bidding. There is no condition of zero customs duty and all, or it is through tariff based competitive bidding, international competitive bidding, or it is through tariff based competitive bidding. Friends, the first three categories are quite simple because we have discussed that in GST itself. What are they? Supplying goods to advance authorization holder, duty free import authorization holder, inputs. Supplying capital goods to EPCG holder. Supplying any goods, inputs or capital goods to EOU, ESTP, STP and BTP. normal category. This was there even in your GST, even in your foreign trade policy, supply by a manufacturer to these three categories. Now, supply by main contractor or subcontract to a project, and friends, that project should be either covered by 5 categories. First is project, United Nations or international organization or project which is funded by them. Second is a nuclear project, whether national competitive bidding or international competitive bidding. Third, friends, you are talking about a project which is funded by multilateral or bilateral agencies or funds notified by your Ministry of Finance, international competitive bidding. Fourth is you are talking about supply to a project where import is allowed at zero customs duty through a customs notification 50/2017. Again, the project is allocated through your international competitive bidding. And last, friends, is nothing but supply of goods to mega power project, which is allocated through your international competitive bidding or your tariff based competitive bidding. So these are all the deemed export categories. Friends, when you talk about your deemed exports, you can always split into two. You can always split into two. Manufacturer to advance authorization holder or duty free import authorization holder or EPCG holder or EOU, EHTP, STP and BTP. This is the first category. This was there even in your GST. Exactly same it was there in your GST. The second category, friends, we are talking about not manufacturer, main contractor or subcontractor to 5 notified projects. We have discussed how many projects? 5 notified projects. These are 3 categories here, 5 notified projects. Right. In the second case, the supply can be either by main contractor to project agency. This is also deemed export in the second case. Right. First scenario. Second scenario, subcontractor to main contractor. This is also deemed exports. So main contractor to project agency is deemed exports. Subcontractor to main contractor is also deemed exports. Third, you are talking about subcontractor to project agency or authority is also deemed exports. So in the second category that we are discussing, where you are talking about 5 notified projects, it can be by this supply of goods to notified projects can be by main contractor to project authority, where project authority will make the payment to directly to main contractor. So payment will be directly made by project agency to the main contractor, or subcontractor to main contractor. Subcontractor to main contractor, who is in turn giving to project authority. Now friends, here also this is also called as deemed exports, where the payment is directly made now not by project authority to subcontractor but by main contractor to subcontractor. And third, friends, we are talking about a subcontractor directly to project agency, directly, where you are talking about this payment is now made by project authority directly to subcontractor. Now friends, this will not happen usually. The first two are normal cases. The third is a special case. Why? First two are normal cases. Subcontractor to main contractor to project authority is the sequence, and both are deemed exports. Subcontractor to main contractor will make the payment, deemed export. Main contractor to project authority will make the payment, deemed exports. Now third is a special case where project authority is directly communicating with the subcontractor. This will be added, this direct contract between subcontractor and project authority will be added in the original contract or subsequently, but before actually supplying the goods. So either in the original contract itself, it will be said that directly subcontractor will communicate with project authority and the payment directly will be made by project authority to subcontractor, right? Or subsequently it is added in the main contract. It is there originally in the main contract, or subsequently it is added in the main contract, but before the supply of goods is actually happening. So this is a very special scenario, right? So you are talking about subcontractor to main contractor, deemed exports. Main contractor to project authority, deemed exports. Exceptional case, directly subcontract to project authority, it is also deemed exports. Only condition is, friends, this should be Either that in the original contract or subsequently it is added in the main contract, but before supply is made they should be added in the main contract, and it should be said that subcontractor will directly supply goods to project authority and project authority will directly make the payment to the subcontractor. So that, friends, you have to take care. Right. Now, friends, even this example that we have discussed is given here. The same in terms of explaining the same thing is given in the example. We are not discussing that. Now, friends, you have to understand the objective of having your deemed exports. Why to have deemed exports and what is the benefit? Objective and benefit. And with this, we are done with your deemed exports. What is the objective of having deemed export? Friends, we are first discussing about the objective of having this deemed export. Now, friends, understand that supposing you are talking about say advance authorization holder or duty free import authorization holder, or you are talking about EPCG holder or EOU, etc., or notified projects. Now, these people would have normally imported goods, and this would not have attracted import duty. But they would have imported the goods. Import of goods would have been there, but it would not have attracted import duty. I am not writing inputs or capital goods because it can be both. It would not have attracted import duty. But foreign exchange payment would have been there. So payment would have been made to the supplier outside India in foreign exchange. So India is losing foreign exchange. Now, friends, what they are trying to tell, why not you purchase goods, domestic supply of goods. Why not you purchase the goods from within India? So this purchase initially you are talking about from USA. Now, why not you purchase from within India? If you purchase within India, obviously there will be GST. Obviously there will be GST, and in the first three cases you can also apply for refund of GST. Not in all the cases, in the first three cases. GST will be there in all cases. Right. So there will be surely GST, but refund of GST can be applied. So that is the GST subject matter. But what will happen is, now these people are going to make the payment to the Indian supplier. Payment will be in Indian rupees. So you are saving foreign currency. That is a dual objective. First, you are promoting the domestic suppliers. First, why it is called as deemed exports, we are trying to understand. Why this transaction is referred to as deemed exports and why the benefits are given. Why it is referred to as deemed exports and why the benefits are given. First is you are promoting the domestic suppliers. So first is there is promoting the domestic suppliers. You are promoting the domestic suppliers. You are ensuring that there is manufacturing within India. Second, you are saving foreign currency. You are saving payment in foreign exchange. Friends, saving foreign exchange, not making the payment of foreign currency is equally bringing foreign currency. So there are dual objective. First is it is to ensure, why it is called as deemed export. Why supply from India to all these categories, 3 plus 5 categories, is called as deemed exports. Why it is referred to as deemed exports. That's dual reason. First is it is promoting domestic suppliers because these people are purchasing from domestic suppliers. Second, you are saving saving your foreign exchange. How you are saving your foreign exchange? If you would have gone for your import, you would have paid foreign currency. If at all you would have gone for your import, you would have paid foreign exchange. Now you are not paying foreign exchange, you are paying Indian rupees. So that is a savings your foreign, that is saving your foreign currency or foreign exchange. Now saving of foreign exchange is equally bringing foreign exchange. So it has got dual objective. This dual objective, friends, which is highlighted in your blue shade, you have to remember. Which is highlighted in blue shade, you have to remember. First is promoting the domestic suppliers. Second is saving the foreign currency. And for that purposes, friends, you have this concept called as deemed exports. Whether the goods are leaving outside India, no, the goods are within India. The goods are within India, but still you call it as deemed exports and you're giving some benefits. What are the benefits? We'll discuss later. We have understood the objective. It is to promote the domestic suppliers, right? It is to ensure that the domestic suppliers manufacture the goods within India, and it is also to ensure that if these people were purchasing from outside India, that is import, they would have paid some foreign exchange. Now they are not purchasing from outside India, they are purchasing from within India. They are paying Indian rupees. So there is some savings of foreign exchange, which is equally as good as bringing foreign currency. Savings of foreign exchange is as good as bringing foreign exchange. So these are the dual objective of your deemed exports. Dual objective. And friends, the last thing, the benefit of deemed exports. Benefits. What are the benefits which are given to deemed exports? Rather, in foreign trade policy, benefits of foreign trade policy is extended to all the kinds of deemed exports, except when you talk about your MEA script and SCA script. All that the benefits are given when you talk about your deemed exports. Right, now what is the benefit? We'll take it in two parts. You're talking about deemed exports, total 8 cases, isn't it? 3 plus 5. So second part also you're talking about deemed exports. Again, you're talking about total 8 cases. Your advance authorization holder or duty free import authorization, next is EPCG, next is EOU, etc. First 3 cases, and last 5 cases are notified 5 projects. Right. Now what will happen is, the supplier is a domestic tariff area. The supplier is within India. The recipient is notified 8 cases within India. 8 categories. So the recipient is also within India, but 8 categories. Now this supplier within India, this transaction is referred to as deemed exports. 2 things will happen. What if he is importing? Importing the goods right? If at all he is importing the goods, again you are talking about 2 scenarios. There is import of inputs or capital goods. Rather, it's only inputs. Now this domestic tariff area can import the inputs without payment of import duty, going by advance authorization. So even if I am supplying to say 100% EOU, one of the example of deemed export, I can also apply for advance authorization. I am not going to pay import duty. But when I am telling I am not going to pay import duty, I am not going to pay BCD and other customs duties. But if at all you are talking about deemed exports, I have to pay IGST and compensation cess. I'll pay and take the input tax credit, right? Because you are focusing on FAR value, and my export obligation will be in FAR value. Correspondingly, my export obligation, this is all extra point which you have already discussed. Correspondingly, my export obligation will be in FOR value, not FAR, free on road value. This you already discussed when you discuss your advance authorization. Now your domestic tariff area is also applying for your advance authorization. What is happening, friends? On the import of inputs, I am not paying import duty, but I have to fulfill export obligation. Why? I have gone for advance authorization, so I am not going to pay import duty. I have to fulfill the export obligation, which will be in FOR value, because it is deemed exports. Additionally, friends, you have to understand that there will be GST, obviously, which will be paid by the supplier, and refund of GST can be there in the first 3 cases. In the first 3 cases, not all the 8 cases, in the first 3 cases by the supplier or recipient. So GST payment will be there in all 8 cases and refund will be there only in the first 3 cases. See, this is all about GST. So we are not focusing on that particular GST. Our focus was even a person who is making deemed exports can apply for advance authorization, not EPCG. He will not pay import duty, but he has to fulfill his export obligation in FOR value, free on road value for deemed exports. So even a person who is having deemed exports, can go for advance authorization, import the inputs without import duty and fulfill the export obligation in FAR value. When I am telling that import the inputs without import duty, BCD and other customs duty will not be there, but IGST and compensation cess will have to be paid because it is not actual export, it is deemed export. So payment will be there and obviously I can take the input tax credit. Right. Now friends, when you talk about the second scenario where you are importing another input, so this was say import of input 1, now say this is import of input 2. Another input you are importing where you have paid import duty. You have actually paid import duty. Don't worry, if you have paid import duty, when you are making deemed export supply, you will get deemed duty drawback. It is not actual export, so it is deemed export, so you will get deemed duty drawback. There is no export obligation. You will get deemed duty drawback. And friends, this deemed duty drawback is either all industry rate or brand rate. There is no special brand rate. Either all industry rate or brand rate. If it is notified, go for all industry rate. If not notified, go for brand rate. Go for brand rate. You don't have an option of special brand rate. In actual duty drawback, actual export, you have all the 3 options, but you have only here all industry rate and brand rate. Friends, what is happening here? Now in this scenario, for import of import 2, at the time of import of import duty, you have paid import duty. And now you can go for deemed duty drawback. There is no export obligation. You can go for deemed duty drawback, right? Either in terms of all industry rate or brand rate, no special brand rate. And as far as your transaction with respect to GST is concerned, the same thing will fall good. The same good thing will hold good, which means that this transaction will also, deemed exports will always attract GST. GST will be paid by the supplier in all the 8 cases of deemed exports, and a refund of GST will be there by supplier or recipient only in the first 3 cases of your deemed export. So that will be true. So that is all to do with your GST. Let us not focus on GST for the time being. If you compare both, in the first scenario, import 1, this domestic tariff area which was making deemed exports, it applied for advance authorization, imported the input 1 without import duty and fulfilled the export obligation. If at all import duty is not paid, there is no question of duty drawback. Fulfill the export obligation F4 value. In second scenario, when you are talking about import of input 2, as import duty was paid on this input 2 at the time of deemed exports, which is not actual export, you are going to go for deemed duty drawback. First time we are discussing something called as deemed duty drawback. We are not talking about actual duty drawback. We are not talking about that. We are talking about deemed duty drawback. We are not talking about the section 74, section 75 actual duty drawback. Obviously, reference is there, but you are talking something about deemed duty drawback because it is not actual export. It is deemed exports. In deemed duty drawback, you can go only for all industry rate or brand rate. You cannot go for your special brand rate. You cannot go for actual duty drawback. You can go for AAR or SBR, depending on whether AAR is sufficient or not, right? And BR is always there when there is no AAR. But in deemed duty drawback, you cannot think of SBR. If the rate is notified, go for AAR. If it is not notified, go for BR. Go for brand rate that you have discussed thoroughly in your customs law. So these two are the benefits. Even a deemed exporter gets the benefit of advance authorization, no import duty, no question of duty drawback, but export obligation in FOR value. And friends, we have discussed when it is a deemed export, you are not required to pay normal customs duties and special customs duties, but you have to pay IGST and compensation cess. Don't worry, pay and take the credit. So that we have already discussed when you have discussed about your AA and EPCG. The other benefit is, if at all on certain imports you have paid import duty, don't worry. When you are having deemed exports, deemed exporter can go for deemed duty drawback as for AIR or BR, but not SBR. Deemed duty drawback. So that benefit is that these benefits are actually there for actual exporter. They are also there for deemed. They are also there for deemed exporter, but small changes. See, if it is actual exporter, he would not have paid any import duty, including IGST and compensation cess. And if it is actual exporter, he would have gone for AAR, BAR or SBR. So there are small changes. So that small changes you have to understand. And this deemed export transaction is very much subject to GST. GST will be paid by the supplier. So you have to refer to section 147 of your GST law. Refund can be taken by supplier or recipient as the case may be, either or, but only for first 3 cases, not all the 8 cases of your deemed exports. In deemed exports in FTP is totally 8 cases, 3 plus 5, whereas in GST it is only 3 cases, the first 3 cases. That is all about the benefits of your deemed exports. Benefits of your deemed exports explained in a very simple way by way of pictorial presentation, rather than reading the theoretical points and not sure what you are reading. This foreign trade policy entire thing, I think we have spent around 12.5 hours or 13 hours, but it is worth. Not less than 10 hours is required for FTP. If you are spending say only 6 hours, 7 hours in the initial discussion, I don't think it will help you out. It is required. Obviously, my estimate was 10 to 11 hours. It has taken 2 hours extra. No need to worry. When at the time of discussion, we have discussed a lot, and all the small aspects we have discussed. When you are revising, you can always remember the flow chart and you can revise it very quickly. I am sure revision can happen within 4 to 5 hours. First revision. Second revision, you can make it more quick. So when you are revising, that revision can happen within 5 hours, and second revision maybe even less than that, 3 hours, right? So you have to ensure that this detailed discussion of FTP we have done only to ensure that you understand each nook and corner. And I surely believe that customs and FTP together, customs is actually very simple compared to FTP. Though it occupies much of the portion, but it's very simple compared to FTP. Together occupies 25 marks, and believe me, my friends, it is easy to crack in customs and FTP. You can always think of 22, 23 plus marks out of 25. When you talk about GST, there are a lot of intricacies that are there, connections that are there. Even here we have connected a lot of things in foreign trade policy, but GST is full of connections. So there can be a lot of questions which are challenge questions, which I'm sure most of you, if at all we have a challenge question, most of you will make some or the other mistake. You may not get full marks, you may get only partial marks. Whereas in customs and FTP, mainly in customs, direct questions are there. If you have read the concept, if you have revised the concept, they cannot ask a bouncer question. There can be n number of bouncer questions in GST, which is not possible in your customs. And FTP, there can be a lot of bouncer questions, but if you see the tradition of ICI, they have not asked any bouncer question in FTP also. So it is very simple to crack in terms of your revising and getting good marks. I again repeat that your target should be 22 or 23 out of 25 marks in customs and FTP. Even an average student can easily get that. And that is the reason the discussion that of customs and FTP was very much enlarged. That is all, everything about your foreign trade policy, my friends. And if you talk about say chapter 8 of foreign trade policy and chapter 9, chapter 8 talks about disputes and resolution. 9 talks about definitions and miscellaneous matters. That is not relevant, so that is not discussed. All the other chapters of your foreign trade policy we have thoroughly discussed. In terms of total 9 chapters were there, and we have discussed in each one part. That's everything about your foreign trade policy.